And welcome to our next session with Mayukh. Mayukh from CueIn.AI. Mayukh, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing? I'm just looking forward to the holidays.
Oh, I am too. I am too. And it's cool just to do this during like right before everything's happening after Black Friday. But I will say I'm excited to talk to you. I think you have had quite a journey. I'm very curious just to ask you questions on that, and then get into the details of your new company that you founded with your co-founder. But first, I want to call out for the audience. I know that you were part of Salesforce for I think it's over 4 years working on Salesforce Einstein. Do I have that
Yeah,
right?
absolutely right. Yeah, almost 4.5, 5 years. Yeah, even I forget how long it was.
So talk us through just that journey and that experience for you, and then obviously how that integrated and
Mhm.
led you to founding CueIn.AI.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was on the product side on Salesforce Einstein. So this is when by the way, Einstein is like Salesforce's AI umbrella. It's a branding, and
Thank you
under
for
that there,
clarifying that.
yeah, under them there are many AI products. So I was a part of the platform, and so what it really means is, Salesforce has all of these clouds. Like they have their service cloud, they have sales cloud, marketing, and commerce. To me, it feels like each of them are very big companies within this huge giant company called Salesforce. And each of them, and we're talking about like 5 or 6 years back, right? And
Right.
there was still AI then. There was no large language models in Gen AI, but AI was very prevalent. And there was all of these opportunities to build AI into enterprise applications. And if you think about many of the underlying technologies that are being built, are kind of common across whether it's a sales use case or a marketing use case or a service use case. And the theme of this platform was, can you build those underlying building blocks which will power sales, service, marketing, and so on and so forth. So that's the platform that I was working on. What is most interesting, and I know I talk about this a lot, I almost felt like an investor because you kind of see
Mm.
this wide variety of use cases across all of these different, verticals. And the more important thing, you also see which of them are experimental versus which one actually gets mass adoption. So you kind of start sharpening that instinct. Okay, these are just experimental.
Mm.
It's a cool demo. It's great. It's fascinating, but there won't be a lot of enterprise traction into it. So that's
And you're
another.
talking internally, like while looking at the data and the clients that are utilizing the tools.
Exactly, because
Okay.
because we see it because Salesforce a lot of customers, and some of them are, I would say, not innovators, right? And they adopt something when it's quite mature. So
Yeah.
you get to see which of those are matures, which of them are making impact versus which ones are not. And so that was kind of fascinating as a part of that platform. And we were mostly working on something called automated machine learning. So like, how do you automate the machine learning for, all of these different clouds, all of these different use cases? For instance, in sales, lead scoring, like you have all of these leads. How do you know which leads are
Mm.
better and are more likely to convert in an opportunity? If you think about service, like there are common use cases, obviously bots is there, but there are also use cases around, you have tickets and cases. Like, can you classify those things based on priority? Who should it be routed to? In marketing, you can think about recommendations, related use cases. And my second half, I kind of moved more into conversational AI. So I was heading our Einstein bots. I was a part of the service cloud. So I was working on conversational AI, and also had influence on our agent assist as well as some of the voice programs. So that's kind of what my journey at
Okay.
Salesforce was. Also got lucky enough to give one of the keynotes, Einstein keynotes in Salesforce's annual Dreamforce conference. Very different experience, a lot of stress, as you can imagine,
I'm
behind what
sure.
goes on, but it was really fascinating to be able to talk about some of the things our team was building to the community.
I'm sure. And I actually came across some of those. And I tell your audience, go ahead and search that as well too. Really interesting to see. So, for you? What was the then moment of like, okay, I wanna, like, what did you see? Maybe you didn't, but did you see something at when you were at Salesforce, specifically Einstein, that led you to the creation of your own company?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was definitely seeds planted. By the way, as someone who at one time wants to be an entrepreneur, you're always looking for things for a while,
Yeah.
and just and not always the timing is perfect. But working on the conversational AI side, and this was both pre-pandemic and during the pandemic and post-pandemic. So I saw that whole journey. um, Conversational workflows was quite important. Like what it means is like whether virtual agents or bots or even live chat with human agents or even voice calls. And more of the Salesforce's customers were actually investing in conversational workflows. Definitely a lot in bots, especially during the pandemic because of the obvious
Yeah.
reason. And one of the things that I noticed is there are a lot of tools out there which helps you to build these workflows. But when it comes to evaluating these workflows or doing analytics on top of it, and I'm not talking about high level analytics, really understanding deep what's happening in the conversations where things are breaking, where users are getting frustrated, there were not a lot of tools there, and the problem itself was quite difficult. And so that was one of the key insights that I had. Like the observability, the mining, how do you evaluate was quite important. I think in a more succinct way or a more emotional way to put it is like all of the CX teams, they're building all of these workflows, they're building, designing their bots, or they're designing their knowledge bases, but many times they didn't have confidence in what they're building. So how do we help them to gain, hey, what you have built works, it helps customers, they make them happy, they solve their problem. So that maybe in a one way what we're trying to solve, how do we make the CX teams feel more confident in what they're building?
Yeah. And at least for myself and the audience, can you give maybe an in-depth
Hmm.
definition of what you talk about when you say workflows?
Yeah.
Because you talked about the chat, and I get that, but is there an
Mhm.
overarching understanding when you're talking about workflows for a company?
Yeah, so any of these, like if you think about a chat bot, like let's say if you talk about a commerce scenario, someone says that, hey, they want to return something, like what are the steps involved to actually do the return and how is it shaped in your conversations? Maybe they're asking for the email address, maybe they're asking for the order number, and maybe they ask which country they're from and where did they bought it from, and based upon that the steps to return might be different. Some cases you might have to go into a store, and some cases they might be able to do a return online. Similarly, there can be, for various different use cases, the workflows can be also on the live chat side, like when it goes to a human agent, how are they solving it? Let's say we take a use case of financial services. Maybe they have a additional charge on the credit card that they don't recognize. So how do the live human agents solve that problem? Again, this whole thing is happening not through a UI; it's happening back
Yeah.
and forth through a conversation or a phone call.
And I want to just ask you a one-off question on this to get your
Yeah.
opinion. As you're talking about this, how I try to identify this a little bit is on the phone, and specifically, like we've had now for years and years and years,
Hmm.
IVRs, interactive voice response systems, right?
Yes.
Um, and there's workflows on that, and I recall
Mhm.
a while ago in my career building those as well too. Has that like is this brand new territory, or has that always like can you analyze? Were people analyzing IVRs and now there's just no way to understand this, or is this two completely different things that we're talking about here?
It's related, but there has been a shift. Like, of course, there are ways to analyze IVRs, but more and more, conversations are going, there's voice bots, which are not IVR driven.
Hmm.
Also, the actual human conversations, like, sure, you go through the steps maybe, and then you're actually going
Right.
to a human. And how is that conversation panning out? How are the humans interacting to address their queries? Are they interacting well? Are they even understanding? Some cases it might be that the industry is shifting or their products are shifting, and the humans don't have the right knowledge at their fingertips to be able to resolve it. And how do you figure out which of those areas where they're not able to resolve? Also underlying, there is so much of wealth of product knowledge that you can leverage. For instance, like maybe going back to the example of return, like you understand people are coming to return stuff, but what every company wants to know, why? So what is the
Yeah.
root cause underneath it? It's like, and some of them are kind of surprising. It's not always that they're coming for return. You would think that, oh, sizing issue for e-commerce or something like that. But sometimes people are coming, asking questions about return because the return policy is not clear. Or maybe the return slip was not included in it. Or maybe they went to the store, they didn't get the return. So it's not about just returning the product, but also the process and where some of those bottlenecks are. And you can imagine there are hundreds and thousands of conversations happening across, sometimes channels, different modalities, maybe voice, chat, and bot. How do you aggregate all of those and see what are the top root causes around the returns where my company can focus on to improve the CX? And that's
Yeah,
valuable.
I think that's fascinating because I think right now, if you look at just the market, building and creating, let's just use the example of bots, seems to be table stakes at this point, and it's really easy to do that now.
Mhm.
But the talk of what you're mentioning of iterating and
Yeah.
how to iterate isn't talked about much at all. It's just about getting it up there, but not like, all right, well, how do you improve on that?
Mhm.
So walk us through now CueIn
Mhm.
dot AI. So I know you gave kind of the premise and the theory behind it. Like, talk to us about the platform itself. What have you built, and what
Mhm.
is it that you sell to? I know we talked about mid market enterprise companies.
Yeah, so we are building a co-pilot for customer experience teams, mainly focusing on unifying the support data across modalities, channels, or even vendors. Some of these companies are using different vendors, and bringing them all together and providing. They have lots of questions about that conversational data that's going on, and we analyze and provide answer to those questions. And on the main problems, the three key problems that we are helping to solve is help them, scale their CX so that it does better. And some of the problems that they have faced is like, multiple channels and conversation that's happening. How do they connect them together? Second is larger volume of conversations. Like just imagine even listening to one call recording or reading through a chat. It's very hard, takes time consuming. It's also, I've done it, is like after you do a few you feel like I don't want to do this job. Like who's going to go read through all of these things? It's very, very hard. And so when you have hundreds and thousands and sometimes millions of those conversations, how do you analyze that? Most companies do a sample from time to time. It's not very
Right.
comprehensive. And another thing that's coming up is how can you do that in real time? For instance, like we just talked about Black Friday, and we have scenarios where certain coupons or discounts were given out, but when the customers were trying to add that coupon code in the cart, it somehow didn't work. And and so there were two. This is a real example, and there was a spike in customer support requests around they were trying to get price adjustments because the coupon code didn't work, or many of them are trying to cancel their order. And you want to know this in real time because every hour you wait, you're actually losing revenue. It's not even customer support, you're losing revenue. So the sooner you come to know that there is something broken, the sooner you would be able to fix. So it's more like real-time trends and anomalies is another thing that we are looking into and offering to our customers.
So then, I I assume that a lot of questions
Mhm.
that companies need to ask, um, like are there are there templates? Are there a common question, right? Like you get to a point of, all right, this company, when you're looking at all the data, you need
Mhm.
to ask this, this, and this, or is every company unique from your perspective? Like, and how do you help out that, right? Because it's like now you got access to all the data. You're saying to me that now you can ask questions about
Mhm.
anything, about products, about discounts. Like, where do you start? Is I guess my question to you.
Yeah, I think it's a very nuanced question. It's a great question. In certain industries, there are overlaps around the kind of questions that are asked. And in certain industries, there's less and less overlap. It's more snowflake in nature because their business is very unique. And so, but what is interesting is the underlying technology to understand language and what users are asking. So we don't have any notion of our AI model doesn't know that this is an e-commerce return use case versus this is a financial services, and a credit card charge that they want to refund. It just looks into those conversations and unsupervised identifies those intents and queries that pops up. And it's really a factor of the volume. If more and more volume of conversation asking that specific query or intent would bubble up. So that taxonomy is almost like iteratively is built and doesn't need to come from the customer themselves. Having said that, if they already have a taxonomy built in, they can influence that. So there's ways to seed that model. So that's why we are kind of excited, because the technology works. So we have customers in e-commerce, in health and benefits, and travel and hospitality, and financial services, and we are not doing extra additional work. It's the technology automatically figures out and are able to answer the question, if that
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah, it does. I guess, like, just to go one step deeper into that for the audience, is it that, from your opinion and working with your clients so far, is it that they have been trying to figure out these answers about, what are the discounts being used as, or how effective is our chatbot,
Yeah.
and now you have provided the technology that for them to do that, or is the kind of technology there first, and you're trying
Mhm.
to educate the clients of, like, okay, here are some questions now that
Mhm.
you can start asking your business.
I love that question. It's actually both. So
Uh,
they wanted to know, like, when, so this is going back to Salesforce. They implemented the chatbot. They knew first few five use cases. Almost every company knows what are the top five or six use cases. But they want to know how it's doing. Is it breaking apart? Like, even those use cases, there are deviations. Like, maybe the bot gave an answer, but it didn't satisfy the customer, and they want to know what is the percentage of cases where the customer was not satisfied. And generally what happens is they get escalated to a human agent. So how did the human agent satisfy it, and can we learn from that diff, like what the
mm,
bot said and what the agent said, and inform or improve the design of the bot? They always wanted to know it. I don't think the technology was there to do that very well, especially deep into the conversations. So they did more high level. Okay, these are the areas where the answers are not given. They know that, but they don't know how to improve. What's the next step? What's the action to take? The second part is because of a large language model and the advancement in technology to understand some of the use cases which was very hard and has to be done manually can now be automated. So there's new opportunities there, like this root cause analysis that I talked about. Like, I mean, it's quite interesting because sometimes the root cause of why the customer reached out to you, you cannot analyze that by listening to the customer. You have to listen to the solution, because the agent have more insights. They're looking into their account, they're finding some issues and said, "Oh, this is the problem." And then we see that problem is repeating from the agent side. So you have to also look at the agent side and
yeah,
understand that. And it can be anywhere in the conversation, not in the
yeah,
first, not in the middle. It can be in multiple user utterances. To be able to understand the entire conversation and surface that, that's a technology which didn't even exist before.
yeah,
And related to that, another common thing is QA of agent interaction. That's a very common stuff in the industry, and almost every company has some kind of a rubric, for the how they actually do that. And it's very manual. They have rubrics like, if the agent showed empathy, did they personalize the conversation, did they provide next steps in the conversation, did they read what the user said before and then didn't force the user to restate that. I mean, you just have to look into the conversation and score in each of these factors, and there was no AI to do that before, before like generative AI and large language models. So
yeah.
some of those use cases are now becoming more prevalent, can be done more easily. So I would say the answer is both. Things that was there, they wanted to know, it was not possible, and there are some of these things, newer areas now, which can be done, which was not being able to be done before.
So, I want to go one level deeper and get a specific from you, which
Yeah.
is, if let's say, and we don't have to use an actual client of yours, but
Mhm.
like direct to consumer businesses
Yeah.
after Black Friday, let's say they have a large collection of data, phone, email,
Yeah.
chat, and they're using CueIn.AI. What would be one or two examples of questions that they should be asking right now if they had all the access to the data and the access to QN?
Yeah, I think some of the question they should be asking is like, I mean, if you're talking about the CX and the customer support, and they have
Yes.
some kind of a bot in place, how is the bot able to self-serve, and what percentage? And the cases where they're not self-serve, what are those topics? Are there newer topics where it's not able to self-serve? And when they're not doing it, how are the human agents self-serving that, so that it can inform the design of the bot or optimize the bot design? So in the future, when the next Black Friday comes or throughout the year, it's able to self-solve more of those. So that's kind of another thing. The
Yeah.
other thing which I talked about, especially in Black Friday, understanding this trending stuff and the anomalies that's happening, and trying to being able to identify it sooner, I think would be quite critical, and that's what they're trying to do. Like, let's say I gave the example of the coupon code, which is very common during holidays, and it didn't work. And as a result of which, the customers were complaining about it or canceling their order, even worse. And they want to know it sooner. And that's the kind of questions. What are the friction in their buying process? And can they know it immediately in real time so they can address that?
I love that, and thanks for that. I think that's really insightful. Um, what I have to give you another broad question, but it's
Yeah.
because we're not specific. But it's like, in your opinion, what are what should a company optimize for? In your example with self-serve, right? Like,
Mhm.
should it be a company be optimizing for like, okay, yep, we weren't able to self-serve 40% of those questions. How do we get that to 20%? Is it okay to be at 50% getting the agent involved? I guess
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like, what's the answer? And I know it's not every company is the
Mhm.
same here, but I always like to ask the question, like, what are we optimizing for? And how would you
Yeah.
respond to that?
Yeah, I think a good way to think about it, like we should put ourselves in the, I mean, we're all consumers at the end of the day. Like, it's not that we don't want to interact with the bot or, we always love to interact with human and it goes vice versa. It's like we want to get, we have a problem, customer support problem, and we want to get it resolved. If the bot is able to resolve it faster, quicker, without me waiting for 10 minutes on a call, I would love that. But there are some complex topics, right,
Hmm.
which I know a virtual agent cannot solve it, or at least not today. For that, don't make me go through that process. Like, I would like to talk to a human who can actually solve some of those complex stuff. So I don't think the goal is like, I don't think it will ever be 100% self-service. There are cases where the humans are involved. But the easier ones and some of the more nuanced ones can be solved by the bot, and the more complex and difficult ones can go to the human. But again, when it goes to the human, do the human agents have the right tools at their fingertip? Like, for example, one of the companies that we are working with, they're in the benefits management during the open enrollment time. They have like huge guides around benefits, and people are asking about the deductibles and all of those complex scenarios. And it would be great for the human to ask this question to that knowledge base and get the answer quickly to be able to support. So that's also part of the optimization for the human agents.
Hmm.
One other thing I wanted to say, which is I see it's catching up more, is this concept of an age-old concept of customer satisfaction, but it's more like a real-time inferred customer satisfaction, because the problem with the age-old method, it's like a survey-based. It happens later on. It has low take rates. It's biased, and there's so many other things. And the most annoying part is, like, if you read the customer conversation, you would have a very good guess how satisfied they were. But yet we do this annoying thing of asking later on, like, how did it go? So the idea is, can we just go through the conversation, see the steps that the bot or the human agent did, and kind of the conversation they had to infer what the customer satisfaction is, which is a leading indicator. And the reason I brought it up, that has to be balanced with the self-serve. Like, there are ways you can self-serve, like 100%, you can just tell the customer to go away, but your CSAT would be really done. I'm talking about an extreme case, but you have to balance the self-serve as well as the customer satisfaction that's happening. Because if you drop the customer satisfaction, I
Yeah.
don't think that's the great. So that's another very, very interesting thing, and it's actually even more important with large language models to build that guardrails, because the bot can go off the rails, and you want a real-time interception to understand the customer satisfaction is actually declining, and maybe it's a good time to stop the bot and go to a human agent.
Yeah, I love your discussion about the real time CSAT scores, and where I'm drawing the line, and maybe the audience that is in B2B SaaS can understand as well too, which is that if you think of a tool like Gong, for
Yeah.
instance, and Gong's now at a point of it can tell you a certain prospect or deal, the likelihood of it closing based on all the data and the inputs, and it's really that same concept of like, okay, in real time, this customer, what are the likelihood that they're like actually 100% happy, or actually they'll never buy again in real time? And I think that's fascinating. Maybe one other kind of area and topic I'd like to ask you about is, again, this data collection,
Mhm.
because all of this is based on every single customer touch point that you have, whether that be on the phone, whether that be through the chat, even just website visits, what they're clicking on, and really understanding everything there is about the customer. I guess from your point of view, Has there been a shift in that, like in the last few, maybe just year, I'd say, or even with the founding of CueIn.AI, where are companies thinking of data differently now than before, and how important is that now moving forward?
Uh, I would think, I mean, I don't know if you would agree. I mean, more and more companies and execs and decision makers are realizing data is more and more important. And being able to collect and store and have a clean data is quite crucial. Also, other things that we are also seeing is there are more, depending upon the business, because we have some clients in different kind of verticals and domains, the security and the privacy of the data,
Mhm.
because there are consumer rights involved.
Yep.
So there are things happening there where you need to make sure that when you are analyzing, the PII and PHI is de-identified there. And one subtle difference, I'm not talking about redaction. Redaction is removing it. Like, it's because that hinders understanding the conversation. It's de-identified. Like, we don't need to know what the email is. We just need to know there was an email there. That's good enough.
Fair.
And that part is quite critical. I think, especially in some of the financial services or healthcare domains, because I don't know if you have ever come across a bot where it says don't share your credit card information here. They just give this disclaimer and just hope that no one shares it, but someone might share it. And so being able to protect that, I think, is quite important as well, I would say. Um, the other thing is being able to, this is also a very common problem. I think there are CDPs built around this. When you have these conversations across different channels, especially vendors, sometimes actually quite often it's very hard to connect them together. So I think that realization is becoming more and more important. Like, is there some way,
Mhm.
there's some ID which can connect them? The more you can do that, the more you'll be able to stitch them together and be able to analyze. So I think that's also quite important.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Um, I guess the last question I have for you is more about looking. It's hard to say looking forward because I feel
Mhm.
like we have so much in the present right now. But maybe just looking into next year, which
Yeah.
is less than a month away. What would you be excited about, specifically at CueIn.AI,
Mhm.
that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think some of these things I talked about is definitely not done. We are constantly iterating on it. This anomaly and trend piece I talked about, it's a very complex problem. It's almost like Google Trends, right? You go to Google Trends, you search
Yeah,
for a thing, you see how it looks. Imagine the same thing for your customer support data right there at your fingertips, and you can
that's
see
amazing.
everything. So we have made some progress there, but there's so much more to do there. Similar thing when I was talking about this understanding and analyzing conversations. I'll give another analogy, maps analogy, right? So think about when many of these conversations are designed, let's say the user wants to get a solution to a problem. So the analogy is they want to go to path A to B,
Mhm.
and the world that is designed thinks the map looks like there's one straight path from A to B, and that's what the map is all about. But maps are not like that. Users are taking so many different paths to get from point A to B, and there are bottlenecks or higher traffic in some of those paths. So that analogy to the world of conversation and CX, what are those different paths taken? Where are those bottlenecks? Being able to surface that visualization, I think, also key to be able to solve some of this problem. The last thing I would say we are working on it is kind of a natural language BI. It's like a chat GPT for all your customer support data. So but it's very different. It's not like you put all of those conversation data, you ask the question and you magically get the answer. It doesn't happen
Yeah.
like you have to do some of those analysis before, and then you do natural language to SQL, and you start getting those response. But it becomes very powerful because you can just go into this and say, tell me what are the top contact patterns, and you fix one. Tell me what are the top root causes around it, and then you can say, okay, how are the agents giving responses to that? Do you see this workflow right there, without going through dashboards and creating custom, and so that natural language BI can be another very interesting thing that we are working through.
Mm.
It's not straightforward as it sounds, or oh, you just put chat GPT for enterprise and it works. It doesn't work that way. But that's another area that we are looking into. Probably there's some opportunities in the future.
Yeah, super interesting. And I think for those listening that are in operations, there's a lot to look forward to, and a lot of I'll be honest, a lot of responsibility coming their way from like analyzing data that they could never do that before. So that's really interesting, and I feel like you're providing so much more, again, opportunity to shift and change in real time to
Mhm.
customer support organizations. So that's awesome. Mayukh, I'm sorry. Again, thank you so much for your time. I wish you the best in 2024 and beyond for CueIn.AI. For those listening, please check out what they have to offer. And that's it. Again, appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Brian. And for the audience, like we have an integration with customer. It's on the customer website live, so do check us out.
And what else do you have integrations with? I just want to make sure we're showing up
Uh,
everyone here too.
so we integrate with a bunch of vendors from Salesforce to Genesis to Amazon. There's a
Awesome.
whole list. So because that's one of the key things. Like we made the integration quite easy, and once you do that, and many customers use different vendors, and we were kind of agnostic. So yeah, so it's also on our website. If you go to CueIn.AI, you will see all of those integrations as well.
Amazing. Thank you for pointing that out. And thanks all.